In this video, I'm going to describe how to pattern a lantern sleeve using the instructions in Pattern Making for Fashion Design by Helen Joseph Armstrong. On page 321, you'll find the beginning of those instructions. This design shows 3 different styles, 2 short versions and the long version. We'll be exploring how to pattern this longer version. First, what is a lantern sleeve? A lantern sleeve is a sleeve that has a seam cut into the pattern to create a specific shape. And so here's a mock-up of the lantern sleeve. You can see that it's smooth fitted into the arm's eye of the bodice yet to come. Flares down here. And then this is the seam that I'm talking about that provides that lantern shape. And then it fits back into the wrist. Could you turn your back to me? So you can see the profile of it flaring this way. And perhaps you can see that this seam is a little bit longer in the back. And that provides a nice grace to the sleeve. Now that we understand what the lantern sleeve is, we need to analyze the designer's sketch to figure out what the proportions are here in order to transfer those proportions onto our sleeve block. So what am I talking about proportions? What I want to know is what we think from the wrist up to this seam is what ratio or what proportion of the total. Now, I do know that this sleeve is going out and then back into the wrist. And so while this looks quite small, there's some undercut underneath this that the sketch doesn't show. So I've made the sleeve before. A good working number from the wrist to the seam is 4 inches. So that's what we're going to work with. We're going to say that this portion of the lantern sleeve is 4 inches of this total length. So let's next apply that 4 inches to our sleeve block that has no elbow dart here. Measuring up 4 inches, draw a line horizontally across, and this will be the line that we cut, and then we'll slash and spread this cuff piece, and we'll slash and spread the upper sleeve the same amount in order to create that flared shape. Once you have the 4 inches or horizontal line marked, then what we need to do is make marks from the wrist up to the arm's eye, divide it into 8 pieces, and along these lines, this is where we will cut and slash rather in order to spread. I've measured across here at the bicep, and it almost divides evenly. The 2 pieces here are ever so slightly a little bit larger. That's just fine. And a little bit bigger here. Things don't always divide perfectly, so that's just fine. So here we have the sleeve sloper. I've cut the cuff section away from the upper sleeve, and you can see now I've cut along those slash marks, and next what we'll do is slash and spread the upper section and the lower section. We'll be doing that equally. Whatever I slash and spread on this line, we'll slash and spread the cuff the same amount, because this is that seam that needs to be stitched together in a later step in order to create that lantern shape. So on my client, I measured around their arm so that I could know how big the circumference is that we want to spread this to, and we want to aim for about 25 inches. And we want it spread a little bit more at the back so that we have that nice flare toward the back. And so we'll just start pivoting from the top here. We have cut up these lines, leaving just a scant 1/8 of an inch here as a hinge. You can see that brown paper hinges here. And we can then spread this a little bit more in the back and then less in the front in order to achieve approximately 25. This is now 26 inches. That's fine. We can just back off on that spreading a little bit. And that will be great. You want to push pin those down, starting at the center, starting at the top, and then push pinning the bottom. Spreading, push pinning the top, then the bottom. You want to make sure that this doesn't buckle up and distort the shape of the sleeve. You want to make sure this stays flat. So this is how you slash and spread to achieve the extra width of this particular sleeve, and then we'll mark the extra length. Before we go too much further, we need to talk about geometry. We know that this sleeve goes to this seam and then goes in to the wrist. If we were to look at that sideways in a dissected view, the seam, the sleeve might come from the shoulder, and this would be the arm, and there is the wrist. So this is a straight line. If we're looking in a dissected view, this slashing and spreading and then adding extra length is going to make this sleeve go out at an angle and then go back in to the wrist. And this is what makes the lantern shape. Now we all know that an angled line going out is longer than this straight line. So we need to add extra length to this upper portion of the sleeve in order to force this lantern shape out away from the arm. Otherwise it would just hang flat and that wouldn't be as interesting. So I'm going to guesstimate that we need about 2 inches extra length and mark 2 inches longer all the way across. However, when we were looking at this on our model, on Katie, I said how lovely it was that it had some grace and extra length at the back. So this is the overall 2 inches that's added to create the lantern shape. But here at the back, I want a little more length to create that flow, slightly shorter in front, a little longer in the back. So I'm going to add maybe 1.5 inches here at the back position that springs off of this down to here. And then I'm going to create a beautiful blended line from the front here past the shoulder to that back position and then up again, so that this side seam length is the same length as over here. But that's going to give us that added grace. Now that we've added this extra length and then a little bit extra at the back position, we want to double check the circumference, and it is to that circumference that we will slash and spread the cuff. And we're still at about 26 inches. So we'll slash and spread the cuff next to match 26 inches. So now that we've created this shape, let's slash and spread and create the cuff shape. And here again, we're wanting this outside circumference. This is the wrist, this is the top of that cuff section. And we want that to be the same circumference as the bottom of the upper sleeve, because those will need to be stitched together. And this is, I've measured it. Another thing to be careful of here is these slashing and spread, these hinges create little corners. You'll need to round that off so that we have a long, smooth, continuous, curved line. You'll notice that it's spread a little differently on this side than on that, and that is because we are spreading a little more in the back so that we create that grace, a little more fullness in the back. You'll want to connect these in a nice circle Again, a long, smooth, connected line, blended beautifully, just like this is. So I've taped the brown paper down to the white just as a teaching illustration, but I have cut this out. You, of course, in class will create a clean brown paper pattern, but I wanted to show you, make sure that you understood that long continuous line down at the bottom needs to match up and be trued. The side seam needs to be the same length, starting here at the arm's eye and coming down. Very good. So do you see how we added here at the back? And here's our side seam. And it's looking like it's a bit of a corner. And we don't want a corner. We want a long, slow, continuous line. I'm going to true that. The side seam is the same length and the line is beautifully blended now. Now that we've trued this blended line, I've also cut out the cuff, leaving the brown paper taped to the white just for teaching illustration purposes. And now it's time to true this seam to that one. And so anytime you're truing, you want to pin down one piece, and then I call it walking the seams, making sure that this seam is the same length as the other seam. So here we are truing the cuff to the sleeve, and we are indeed a little bit off here. So what you might do is simply pinch out a little excess here on the cuff to make that fit. During that walking, once you've walked the seam once, you want to go back and walk it a second time, marking notches so that your stitcher has a chance to get this stitched together. So for example, keying off of the back where we've added this extra length, you might add notches there, and at the shoulder and at the front, so that the bottom of the lantern can get stitched beautifully to the top of the lantern.